Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Today we are going to empathetically, but objectively, untangle what has to be the most debated, confusing, and controversial nutrient in the entire diet world. Yep, we're talking about carbohydrates. Look, whether you've tried cutting them out completely or you totally rely on them to power through your busy day, we know there's just so much noise out there. So today we're going to cut right through that noise. We're using strict scientific evidence, and we're putting a really special spotlight on how this data uniquely impacts women's health. Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the carbohydrate controversy, break down simple versus complex carbs, explore the low-carb history, dive into the real health data, and finish up with fueling up and fiber. Let's get right into it. Section 1, the carbohydrate controversy. For decades now, we've literally bounced back and forth between high-carb government recommendations and zero-carb metabolic fats. And honestly, it leaves us all wondering, are carbs actually the villain they're made out to be? I mean, it feels like every single week there's a new headline telling us to either load up on grains or banish bread forever. And let's be real, it is absolutely exhausting for anyone who is just trying to eat a healthy, balanced diet. Before we judge them, let's just take a step back and look at what carbs actually are at their most fundamental level. Biologically speaking, they're simply molecules made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. When you digest most carbohydrates, your body breaks them down into glucose. That glucose enters your cells, goes through a complex process called cellular respiration, and produces a molecule called ATP. Think of ATP as your body's ultimate biological battery. It fuels your metabolic tasks and is absolutely critical for your brain's massive energy demands. Section 2, simple versus complex carbs. Now, there is a massive biological divide here that we need to talk about. On one side, we've got simple carbohydrates, which are basically just sugars. Your body digests these super rapidly, causing your blood sugar to spike fast and high. But on the other side, we have complex carbohydrates. Think fiber and starch. Because of their molecular structure, your body takes its sweet time breaking these down. And that's a good thing because it gives you a slow, sustained, and stable release of glucose right into your bloodstream. To really get how we historically started thinking about processing all this energy, we actually have to rewind to the 1890s and look at an agricultural chemist named Wilbur Atwater. He introduced this concept using a calorimeter, which is essentially a mini oven. He figured out that if you burn food to ash, you can measure the heat it produces, giving us the whole concept of the calorie. The simple math became, if your body burns more calories than you eat, you lose weight. Eat more than you burn, you gain weight. Section 3, the low-carb history. It turns out the low-carb craze didn't just magically appear in the 90s. It actually started way back in 1862. Get this, an overweight London undertaker named William Banting went to his doctor for hearing issues. He was told his fat was pressing on his inner ear and was prescribed a diet of almost purely meat, fish, and wine. No starch, no sugar. It actually worked, and he wrote the very first low-carb diet book. We see this idea repeat over and over. In 1926, researchers studied an explorer on an all-meat Inuit diet and found him totally healthy. Then in the 50s, Dr. Alfred Pennington put obese DuPont executives on a high-fat, high-protein diet, basically theorizing that overweight bodies simply turn carbs into fat. That momentum just kept building. By the 1990s, books like Dr. Mauro Di Pasquale's The Metabolic Diet were completely dominating the conversation. The focus shifted heavily away from simply counting Atwater's calories and moved over to examining hormones. The argument was that excessive refined carbs cause rapid blood glucose spikes, which triggers floods of insulin, eventually leading to insulin resistance and fat storage. Section 4, the real health data. So, do carbohydrates inherently cause weight gain and disease? It's a million-dollar question, right? To answer this objectively, without any of the fad diet bias, we have to look at massive population-level reviews. Specifically, we're going to look at the landmark 2015 UK Scientific Advisory Committee on Nutrition report. The crucial takeaway from this massive UK government review is pretty definitive. After poring over vast amounts of epidemiological data and clinical trials, they concluded that total carbohydrate intake is simply not associated with heart disease, it's not associated with type 2 diabetes, and it's not associated with weight gain or a higher BMI. The whole hypothesis that total carbs inherently cause these issues, it just wasn't supported by the evidence. And when we focus specifically on women's health, the data becomes even more compelling. Just look at the major studies on gestational diabetes. Saldana and colleagues in 2004 actually found that substituting fat for carbohydrates significantly increased the risk of gestational diabetes. Laity and al. In 2011 found that a decreased risk of gestational diabetes was associated with a higher carbohydrate intake. And Zhang's massive cohort of over 13,000 women showed absolutely no association between total pre-pregnancy carb intake and the condition. Now, to figure out what populations are actually eating, researchers rely on incredibly detailed tracking, like the UK National Diet and Nutrition Survey. By tracking the exact quantities of carb-rich foods consumed specifically by girls and women, scientists get the vital baseline data they need to prove that typical carb intake isn't the root cause of metabolic disease. But here's the catch. Quality matters immensely. Massive female cohort studies, like the famous Nurses' Health Study, found that the real danger for women isn't carbohydrates as a whole category, not at all. The danger actually lies in diets that are severely lacking in complex cereal fibers while simultaneously being super high in simple, sugary, high glycemic foods that cause those rapid blood sugar surges. That specific combination is what really drives up the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. Section 5. Fueling up and fiber. For athletes in high-intensity sports, carbohydrate loading isn't a myth. It's a vital two-step strategic science. First, you have a depletion phase of 1 to 3 days involving high-intensity training with low-carb intake. Then the magic happens in the tapering phase. 1 to 3 days of rest coupled with a massive intake. We're talking 8 to 10 grams of carbs per kilogram of body weight. This physically supercompensates the glycogen stores in the muscles and liver. It drastically delays fatigue, improves sprint capacity, and even sharpens cognitive decision-making right on the field. But hey, you don't have to be a pro athlete to tap into the superpowers of carbs. For the rest of us, the complex carbohydrate known as dietary fiber acts as a formidable protective shield. High-fiber whole grains like oats, rye, and brown rice are strongly associated with a much lower diabetes risk. Fiber defends the body against metabolic syndrome, lowers high blood pressure, stabilizes insulin levels, and yes, even helps reduce excess belly weight and high triglycerides. There's a great quote from the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health that really drives this home, noting that higher fiber intake is linked to lower risks across the board, from metabolic syndrome and high blood pressure to excess weight and high insulin levels. It powerfully highlights that embracing complex carbohydrates rather than fearing them is a scientifically proven pathway to long-term health. The data tells us clearly, cutting out fiber-rich carbs could actually be doing our bodies a huge disservice. So the diet wars, they're probably going to keep raging on in magazines and all over your social media feeds, bouncing from one extreme fad to another. But now, you're armed with the real biology. You understand complex versus simple molecules, and you've seen the definitive epidemiological data, especially when it comes to women's long-term health. The choice is yours. How will you choose to power your body today?